Hi, folks, and welcome to another edition of An Hour with Bob. Here we are. It is February 1st, 2023. And don't you know, this reminds me, tomorrow is Groundhog Day. And Groundhog Day reminds me of an adventure I had in Usk-Kamenogorsk, Kazakhstan. On February 1st, we were in Moscow, Russia, and it was the coldest time of the year they had in decades. And we were staying in a Hotel Belgrade, right across from the Kremlin. And we had no heat in the hotel. This is a high-rise, big hotel right in downtown Moscow. And I got the bright idea. We went there with two other guys. We all had our own room. And I called to my buddies. I said, look, you know what to do? Go in the shower, turn the shower on hot, and that'll warm up the room for you. Well, guess what? Didn't work because you didn't even have hot water. So I slept in my entire clothes, you know, everything, even coat. It was so cold in the room. Next day, we get on a plane, and Kazaki Air, they called it, and it was the worst, had the worst record for crashes in Asia. And we fly to Kazakhstan. And on February 2nd, we got to the hotel, and I got to take a shower, shave, change, come out, we're going to go to dinner, called for a taxi, walk out the door, 40 feet to the taxi, didn't make it. My tear had come down and it froze on my face. It was 40 below zero. That's my February 1st, February 2nd story. We'll get into that a little more, but I got to welcome my guest, Richard Ferruccio. If you don't know who he is, you know what he does. He's the head of the union, the president of the ACI Guards Union. How you doing?
Good. How you doing, Bob?
Good.
Well, thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk a little bit about the ACI. I'm Richard Ferruccio. I'm the president. It's the Rhode Island Brotherhood of Correctional Officers. That's the name of our organization. I've been involved in the union since '91, so been doing it for a few years.
I know. I've seen you once in a while on TV, and over the years, you know, over the years, yes. Not recently, but I've seen you over the years. I've seen your face. I knew who you were when I ran into you, and I said, you know, asked you if you want to come on the show, and I was pleasantly surprised that you agreed to come on the show. Although this is not, I don't cut people up. I'm not in the business like some of the other shows that you know, their job is to find out the good things about you, so I can jam you. You know, hitting somebody with you know, bad stuff. That's not my game plan. My game plan is to talk about what you do, and maybe we'll hear about some things that happen, but that's up to you. You're going to bring that up, not me. But do you know, let's backtrack a little bit. You've been there since when?
I started at the prison in June of 1984. So
84.
I'm coming up on, this June I will have completed 39 years of service.
39 years,
39 years, yeah.
That's a long time to be in the ACI.
I was a 19-year-old kid walking into that prison system.
Wow. And I'm sure I know a couple names that from Pawtucket that probably have been in there.
Yeah, well, you probably know them. I mean, we all know guys that were on both sides of it. I know a number of correctional officers that know you, that you coached in baseball, as I mentioned
that's
earlier.
funny.
It's amazing how many people you've had contact with through the years. You know,
yeah, it's funny because I coached for 21 years. Minor league, little league, senior league, and Babe Ruth league, and big league over the years. In fact, I can remember, as I told you before, being on the highway one time, speeding a little bit, and a cop pulled the side of me with his siren on, ready to pull me over, and he looked over and he spots me, and he goes, just like that, and he kept going. That was that worked to my advantage. That one time.
Yeah.
But when I went to college, I got stopped repeatedly for speeding, and I didn't get away. They didn't give me a discount or nothing.
No breaks then.
No three, get three, and get the fourth one free, and none of that stuff.
Yeah, I've been like I said, I've been a correctional officer. When I started, the ACI was a really different place than it is today.
Yes.
And a total. I mean, we were coming off of the 70s, which was a very difficult time. Very turbulent time. We were under federal court decree, widely recognized as probably one of the most dangerous prison systems in the country in the 70s. We had a correctional officer, in 1973, brutally murdered there. So we were.
That was during the riots.
Well, actually, it wasn't even a riot. It was at the old medium security that was named after him, Donald Price. It was just a just a medium security facility, and you know what, the officer was just doing his job, was the wrong place, wrong time, and the inmate that killed him was named John Carrillo, still actually incarcerated.
Really?
Yeah, he stabbed him like 34 times.
Oh my God.
Never
I guess
got to see
he was mad.
Yeah, he was mad. Yeah,
Or nuts.
Yeah, he was nuts. I think nuts is the better word.
Nuts
That's
is
why
the-
he's still incarcerated. He's just had a violent career. Matter of fact, about 5 years ago, John Carrillo tried to stab another correctional officer at maximum security. Came up with a real serious weapon that had been made out of metal, and went to stab the officer. And we wear a embroidered badge. And it
Hit the badge?
Hit the embroidered
Lucky
badge.
for him.
And then officers responded, immediately grabbed him. And you know what the funny part was? John Carrillo had been kind of like put up to it by a couple of other inmates. You know,
Well, see, what bothers me about that is this is where I believe in capital punishment. You got a guy in prison for murder, and he's tries to kill somebody or kill somebody. This guy ain't. What can you do to him? He can't. The way it stands right now, he's got no other punishment. He's got life in prison already. What are you going to add on to life in prison?
it is. Years ago, when those 2 young people were killed on the golf course in Johnston.
Yes.
Those 5 people that did it.
Oh my God,
that
that
was
was
a
terrible.
horrible
That
case.
was downtown, and that started. It started in front of the arcade in downtown Providence, as I recall. Right.
did. It
2 young people sitting on the stairs at the old arcade, the oldest mall in the country.
Yep.
It's the arcade.
Amy Shute was the young girl that was murdered. I got to meet Amy's family. What happened was, I was involved. I was the president of the union. I went down there. They put in the death penalty legislation to bring the death penalty back because it was such a heinous crime. And I went down there to testify in favor of the death penalty. The number one reason was kind of what you just said. The reason I was there to testify is if you have an inmate that's doing life without parole and he takes a correctional officer's life or even another inmate's life or another staff member's life, you know, there has to be some penalty for it.
Right.
And you know what? Unfortunately, the bill didn't go anywhere. And if it didn't go anywhere with that heinous crime, it'll never go anywhere right now.
Because it troubles me. And I understand the people that say, because what happens if the person was innocent? Not when you catch them dead to right. I mean, there's absolutely no way it was any other person, especially now with DNA. You know, that they know. Or when, like these mass shootings and stuff, where they knocked them down, they get the gun in their hand, they saw them shoot people. I mean, these people deserve some kind of penalty that's more severe than what they did. They killed some people. They killed 5, 10, 15 people.
It's right now. I got to tell you, as someone who's been in the criminal justice system for a long time, and the ironic part was when that happened. I actually got involved years later with that organization. It was RI-PBS, Rhode Island Victims and Advocacy Support Center. I got involved with that group for a little while because I believed in them. They were basically advocating for the victims. And what's happening right now, the victims are totally forgotten. Everything we hear now is, oh, geez, the poor inmate the poor felon didn't get a chance. He needs another break. And there's some surprising data that would probably shock the average person. You know, I mean, when we see inmates coming into the prison, it's not a first-time offender thing.
Well, they call it
recidivism.
Recidivism,
yeah. The number of inmates that come in repeat.
It's got to be 70%.
Yeah, I think it's actually a lot higher than that, sometimes 85%. And,
wow.
You know, matter of fact, when you asked me to come on that day, I ran a commitment sheet, that number, to see what it was. And there were 14 commitments that came into the ACI last Tuesday. So that was
what do you call them? What do you mean commitment?
Commitments. They were arrested by the police departments. They were transported to the Department of Corrections to be brought to court on the next day. So they came in on a Tuesday night. I could have ran a Friday night, but just happened to be Tuesday night. So I ran them. So this morning I looked at it. I'm like, let me maybe see what the numbers are. Out of the 14 that came in, 12 men, 2 women, every one of them, 100%, had been there before. Had been there before, and sometimes 20, 30, 40 times. There's a belief that the prison's overcrowded. There's a belief that the prison's full of, first-time nonviolent offenders. For marijuana use.
Call it pot.
Furthest thing from the truth. You know, to actually do time in the ACI, you got to kind of work at it to get there. The ironic part is, on that Tuesday, those 14 people that came in, 5 of the men have already been released, within the next day, and both women were released.
Really?
So if we were to look at it, the numbers, 50% are already back out.
Wow.
And lengthy records. If I have the ability to look at things that that the average person can't. And when you look at their criminal records, it's shocking. It really is. So it's right now we're in a unique time. I've never seen anything like it where the victims are totally forgotten about. I have a lot of respect for a lot of the legislators down there, but right now the next big bill that's going to be pushed is trying to eliminate life without parole. And while there can be some debate on it, and some of the people that actually signed on to the bill are really doing it more to have that conversation. But just understand, when somebody gets life without parole, it's a pretty complicated process. There's a special hearing to determine whether they're going to actually be given the ultimate sentence. And the real concern is, what about the victims? Because if you were to change that right now, go back to 1991 and make the changes, the danger is that these families are going to be re-victimized again. Right. And I don't think that's what people are seeing. People are thinking, oh, these poor inmates. And I got to tell you, I've been there almost 39 years. Yep. It's not the poor inmates. It's not the poor inmates. They live pretty good there. The Rhode Island Department of Corrections is probably, if not the best run prison in the entire country, one of the best run prisons in the country. And it's, by the way, it's not because we have the best correctional officers. We have an outstanding group of men and women that do the job, but we have the tools to do the job. And it's simple tools. Like I have a friend of mine who's a director in another state, and I was explaining to him why Rhode Island works better than most states. Yep. Even Mass and Connecticut, our two neighboring states. In Rhode Island prison system, for example, when the inmates come into the chow hall to eat, and they eat 3 times a day, when they come into the chow hall, we tell the inmates where to sit. And, that might seem like a little thing, but in most prisons, both in Connecticut and Massachusetts,
they get in gangs. They get
they sit by race or by gang affiliation. Right. So when that happens, the inmates take ownership of that dining room. They think this is our dining room because it basically is being given to them. Yeah. When you come to visit your family member, your loved one that's in prison, we tell the inmates where to sit. And that doesn't happen in most prisons. Right. The inmates sit by race and gang affiliation. So those are 2 examples of little things that we do that help keep our prison running, because the inmates don't think it's their visiting room. They know that it's a privilege and that we run.
You still have control.
In most prisons, they don't have correctional officers in the dormitory where the inmates are living. So we have day rooms, we have a correctional officer in there. That correctional officer in there, I've never had an inmate, I've been doing it, like I said, almost 39 years, I've never had an inmate say, this is my day room, because we have an officer there. It's not their day room. And it's those little things that we do that help maintain control. And the ironic part about it is the vast majority of the inmates appreciate it, because this is a prison where you can come in, do your time, you're not looking over your shoulder. Right. And that's not the case in most states.
Well, because they automatically make you affiliated with a gang, or make you affiliated with a group. Right.
And it kills me because, like I said, as being involved in the union, I got involved in '91 as the vice president. I was the president when we went on strike. So I've been doing it for a long time, 20 plus years ago. I've got the opportunity to interact with my counterparts throughout the country, and it's frustrating because I see how bad the California prison system is a mess. But I see what's going on.
Well, that's because of the liberalism in California, I think.
But you know what? I'm going to go back to what I said earlier. It's the officers don't have the tools to do the job. In 1991, I got involved in negotiations, and then we had Director George Vos. So talking to our director then, I said to the director, George, you give us the right tools, we'll build you the right house. You give us, half-assed tools, excuse the language, you're going to get a half-assed product. And that's what we fought for. So as a union, we're constantly trying to defend the tools so that we can manage our facilities, because that's what it's all about. Right. There's a number of things that I think we need to improve on. I've had conversations with our progressive legislators. A couple of years ago, when a number of them got in office, I sat down with every one of them, because I'll talk to anybody, and said, hey, listen, we do prison security, custody, and control probably better than anybody in the country. But there are things I never said were perfect. There are things that we're lacking on. For example, our programming for the inmates is terrible. It really is. It's terrible. Inmates.
What do you mean? What they can do to learn something?
Yeah, to learn the program, college. Sometimes what will happen at the department is if a guy has 10, 15 years, he's not even allowed to get in some programs because they want to save those for the guys that are getting ready to get out. Right. Because there's not enough programs. Our previous director, A.T. Wall, he was a guy that believed in education. A.T. was a highly educated guy. Right. He thought, if I can get a guy a college degree, and you know what, he's going to have a successful career. Right. I don't oppose that, but what I will tell you, we've always advocated for trades.
Yes.
Since the early
Yes.
90s, I was talking to George then, the director. It said, you know what, George? Well, while we have the inmates' undivided attention at maximum and medium security,
Make them welders.
Why
Make
don't
them
we teach them,
electricians.
give them a trade, teach them
Right.
how to put in, tile floors and how to do carpentry, and
Correct.
how to do basic electrical. But I also believe you don't give anything to anybody for free.
Right.
They give them the certificate, congratulations, you completed the carpentry program. But then we take these inmates out and we renovate the houses that are off the tax roll.
Right.
This was 1994, and if you remember Providence, the Smith Hill area was a mess.
Yep.
Because I was at the time, I was doing constable work, so I was constantly in that area. And I had said to the director then, you want to take a ride? I'll show you 50 homes that are boarded up, that our inmates can go in, renovate,
Right.
perfect that job skill, you know what I mean, and get this house back on the
Yeah,
market
yeah.
for affordable housing. And then director told me, well, Richard, it'll never happen because the unions won't let it, and that's a bull statement. Because right now, I can tell you, talking to many of my counterpart union people in the trades, they're hurting for bodies.
Right.
So if we could get an inmate a marketable job skill, how to do basic carpentry, how to do tile work, how to do basic electrical,
Right.
we could find these people jobs. And those are the things that frustrate us. So we've advocated. Our programming is a mess. Our prison industries is a mess right now at the ACI. Prison industries, we used to make the license plates. We do a lot of different things.
Right.
At one point we had a paint shop. We had a chemical shop. The state of Rhode Island, many of the agencies used to buy their chemicals in bulk from us for like stripper and wax.
Right, yeah.
And we didn't make a lot of money on the shop, but what we did is we saved those other departments, those other agencies, a lot of money because they were
Right.
buying it for really
30,
cheap
40,
cost.
50%.
Sometimes more than that. Knockoff.
Well, do you know and we'll get back to that, but the prison industries.
Yep.
Well, I used to work in the mayor's office in Pawtucket, and I come up with the idea. I said, why don't we go to the prison and have the prisoners make the drapes, the curtains, and the offices? And how about, I know, because I knew somebody, I can't remember who it is now, a woman over there, and I talked with her. She says, I asked her about my boss at the mayor's desk and a couple other desks. We sent them into the prison and had them all refinished. They come out beautiful.
Come out beautiful.
And 30 cents on the dollar it cost us to do it.
Yes.
I had the entire city council chambers in the city of Pawtucket all redone by prisoners.
Yep. And we have some very skilled inmates, and the ironic part about it is that we talk about college education. Some people don't do well in college,
Right.
but some people are more with their hands.
Right.
And most of the inmate population that I've known in my 39 years, that's the better direction.
Sure,
for them.
sure.
And I have pitched this. I've pitched it then to our director. I've pitched it to legislators through the years. And here we are. It's like 30 years later, and you know what?
Still not
It's still not happening. It does get frustrating because to me it's a no-brainer.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
See this homeless situation that we had at the State
Yep,
House?
yep.
They were talking about buying those little prefabbed houses.
Right.
Our inmates could have been building these things for cheap money for years
Yep.
and putting them out. Now, granted, nobody wants them in their neighborhood, but we have inmate labor that is available to that we can provide them some skills. They could get out there and do it. Ironically, I reached out to some people that are involved in the governor's office a couple of months ago when that homeless encampment was at the State House and said, hey, we have two facilities that are sitting in mothballs. One is the old women's prison,
Right.
and the other is the old the old training academy. It used to be the annex for the intake and overflow for the annex for the intake that are there. Now, I can't speak to the condition inside the facilities at this point in time, but they're state buildings, the roofs are solid, that we could go in there with inmate crews, get the place cleaned up, get
Right.
it up and running, and we could probably, if they really wanted to, we just did some major renovations at the medium security facility right down the street, that we have a huge kitchen. We have inmate crews that are working in their kitchen that we're trying to get them food service certificates. The inmates with our correctional officer stewards, they could cook for the entire homeless population we put in there.
Wow.
And we could do it so cheap. So it's about using inmate labor.
So actually,
to
you'd
offset
have,
the cost.
they'd be cooking, and they'd have a place to stay on top of it.
They would. We could do all the cooking at our medium and ship all the food over and feed the homeless, men and women that are in these units.
Right.
Now, the only problem with the intake one is that there's no bathrooms in the rooms. They're universal bathrooms, so you'd have to do male, female floors.
Sure.
But you can do anything you want, and I think that's a better alternative than doing what we're doing now, putting them in a hotel.
Oh, my God.
They're in a hotel in Smithfield, We're spending a lot of money, and the governor was in a lose-lose situation, But like I said to you, when it does get frustrating, when we've pitched ideas for the last
that makes sense
20 years, and you know what, it falls on deaf ears. Even now, inmate labor. We talk about prison industries and inmate labor. We don't even do garbage pickup on the highways anymore. We at one point had 20 litter crews out there. We had 20 litter crews.
They don't have
we have two. We have two right now that are doing garbage pickup. Two litter crews that go out.
Why?
We had 20. Well, a couple of things. One, when COVID hit, the population dropped. When we had like 4,000 inmates at the ACI, we had a bigger population at the minimum security. COVID came, those population numbers have dropped. We're down about 2,000 inmates, but that's not reason enough. Our director at the time, Trish Coyne-Faig, the woman that just left to go to Providence, work for Providence, she didn't believe that picking up litter was a good productive job for an inmate.
Right.
So really, she
Better
didn't
than
push.
sitting in their
She didn't push
cells
the
doing
crews.
nothing.
Well, actually, the funny part is, Bobby, right on that thought, at the intake service center, when an inmate comes in doing a 90-day or 120-day sentence, and he meets the requirements, meaning he doesn't have a restraining orders against him, so he's not a threat, then what we have an obligation to do is fast track him, get it to minimum, get him out on these crews.
Right.
The ironic part is most of the inmates actually like being out,
Sure.
like being on the crews. And right now, I never begrudge, state workers. But right now we're using state workers on an overtime basis to pick up trash when I have an inmate for $3 a day.
Right.
To me, it
$3
just
a day versus overtime.
Versus,
making $150 a day.
Yeah, whatever the state workers are making. And like I said, I don't begrudge the Department of Transportation. Those people that work there work hard. And if bottom line, if we can't provide them the inmate crews, then the trash needs to be picked up.
Right.
But it's something as simple as that. We can't even put crews out.
It's funny you say that. Just last night on the news, they were showing it again last week and again last night, right in Pawtucket, right not far from, right under the highway overpass. They're living there, and daytime they go there, and at nighttime they go to these shelters that they have the heat and whatever. But they live underneath the overpass, and it's a mess.
It's a mess.
The highway's a mess underneath it,
Yeah.
and that could be cleaned up. All of them could be cleaned up.
It could. And listen, it's a very tricky situation too, because what I think Rhode Island has to pay attention to, that if we solve the homeless problem, understand that we will have people coming in from Massachusetts and Connecticut
Exactly.
to say, hey, you know what, you got a room for a hotel room for me?
That's why
they're coming.
Can you imagine the audacity to say, oh, no, I don't want the ones that were at the State House. Some of them are saying, no, I'm not leaving. I want a hotel.
Yeah.
I'll give them a hotel, all right.
It's just, the sad part is that, once again, wealth of misinformation gets out. One of the guys that actually was there was claiming to be a veteran. Furthest thing from the truth.
Really?
It's the furthest thing. Most all of them have at one point or another been through the prison system.
Right.
The amount of mental.
They're veterans of the ACI.
Yeah, veterans of the ACI, not of our military. Because people get offended. They say, "Gee, how can a military vet be homeless?" And
right.
It isn't the case.
Because they wear a hat.
It isn't the case. They lie. Years ago, one of the news stations was doing an interview with a guy, and he was saying how I came home and my wife left me because I was over there over in the Gulf fighting, and
right.
I still hear the bombs going off, and I'm thinking, no, he's not. He was an inmate
No
with us
way.
at medium security. So I actually called the news station. I said, the guy that you just interviewed
Wow.
was the last 6 years has been at medium security, and by the way, he's a sex offender to boot. I said, so you're making him look like something that he's not.
Right. Right.
And
that's
what's frustrating. And that's unfortunately that's a lot what we see at the prison. One of the funniest things one of the upsetting things for us is we talked a little bit, I mentioned about the progressives in the General Assembly. Well, 2 years ago, I met with a number of them, and as I was saying, I said, we're not a perfect prison system. There are things that we need improvement on. You want to work together with us to bring trades in and ramp that up? You got us 100% support.
Right.
You want to talk about doing, we have a key fee right now. The inmates we used to have a private, state-run commissary for the inmates. Everything they bought through the state.
Right, yeah.
So we had a little bit of a mock-up, but it was minimum. And now what we did is we contract that out to a private vendor.
Right.
That private vendor's coming in here and there.
Raise the prices.
They're killing the inmates. And in fairness to that vendor, prices have gone up. But
Sure.
but inmate labor's the inmate pay hasn't gone up either.
Right.
So so what I had said to them, if you want to work with the union about trying to get this back into a state-run program, we could use inmate labor to actually run it, and they would learn something. So if you
Right, yeah.
you get 6 inmates running a commissary, And you know what? At the end of the month, we find out we're missing 2 boxes of Twinkies. Well, you know what? They all get fired. They say, hey, you didn't do your job. So you know what? They'll learn responsibility and learn how to run the commissary, and we can sell it back cheaper. The other thing that I told some of the progressives were, inmate pay. If you want to increase the pay, because they haven't had an increase in 30 plus
What
years.
did you say,
They make $3 a day. That's the most they can make. If you want to increase that, you will have the support of my union to increase the pay. But don't put in minimum wage, because that's too controversial.
Oh, yeah.
And sure enough, one of the progressive legislators,
want to give minimum wage.
She put the bill in last year to give them minimum wage. I said, but the other thing that I had told her is, the other thing I told her is, don't attack us. When you attack us, then what happens? We put up walls, we throw rocks at each other, and nobody wins. I'm willing to work with you on things to improve our system, but it has to. I can't be working with you,
gotta be a give and take.
and you're attacking us, because one of the attacks we get hit with all the time, well, recently it's starting to go across the country, is I don't know if you've heard of it, the use of solitary confinement. That's what they say.
Yes.
We don't have solitary confinement. We have disciplinary confinement units that are in place. And earlier I was talking to you about the tools to do the job. Well, the tools, one of our tools is to be able to hold people accountable.
Right.
We have probably the best system in the country. We have inmates earn their way in, but we also allow them to earn their way out of these disciplinary confinement units. So depending on what they do, they know exactly what the time they're going to get for what they do.
Right.
Somebody assaults, seriously hurt somebody, he could get up to a year locked in disciplinary confinement.
Describe that. That room.
In many cases, it's the same cells that the other inmates are living in.
Really?
Just what happens, they're given less recreation time
They have
out of their cell.
1 hour a day or something?
Sometimes 2. And we've what happened was in 2016, there was a commission put together to look at it, and we spent countless hours, amazing amount of time, to try and come up with ideas, interview people, and we came up with what we thought was a viable solution. Now what we get hit with is, that was then, this is now. Now for the most part, they want to eliminate it. Nobody under the age of 22 or under the age of 25. We hear different numbers. Nobody over the age of 55 can even be put in disciplinary confinement. None of that makes sense.
Well, when they know that, if the prisoners know that can't happen to them, then
there's no consequences.
Exactly.
Then it's the Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
Then those are tools that you take away from the correctional officers. So I have told the progressives a couple of times that if you put those bills in to do that, what we end up with is we got a group of inmates that come down, and they see this as an opportunity to come and take shots at the corrections officers. And what I will tell you, last year, the first year I did it, every inmate that came in, I ran their criminal record and their institutional discipline record, because it was ironic. I'd have inmates come in and say, well, I did 2 years in SEG, and it messed me all up, and I'm having all kinds of problems because of it. And then we run their institutional record, and we find out, no, you didn't do 2 years. You didn't even do 2 months. They lie. Wow. And there's no accountability.
Oh, gee, they don't tell
No,
the
there's nobody gets sworn in. In 2016, here's an ironic story that this is the first time I'll ever have the opportunity to explain it, because you have a lengthy show. There was an individual that came and testified in 2016 in front of the commission. His name at the time was Jose Davi Lamosa. Now he's Jose Goody Lamosa. He changed his name. But he came in and he gave this testimony, and it was very compelling. I'm sitting there listening to him testify how he was abused by the correctional officers. He was inappropriately touched. He was mistreated. I mean, he made us look like terrible. At one point, he broke down crying. When he got there.
So he's a good actor.
Oh, very incredible actor. And the senators, felt compassion and said, "Oh, you know what? Get up. Take some time. Get yourself, together." Well, I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know this individual. We're a very small state.
Yep.
We have 4,000 inmates. Well, I might not know every inmate. I usually have a general good idea.
Sure.
So come to find out, that inmate had never done time in the Rhode Island prison system.
No way.
It was a 100% lie. He actually had done time years earlier.
But they sucked it all in.
But they sucked it in. And so if you're a person that's watching on TV and you hear this guy get up there talking, you think, oh, geez.
And he's crying.
These correctional officers, what they do to these. See, look at this poor guy. And it was 100% lie. The ironic part is since 2016, he's been incarcerated in our facility. He's come in, been arrested, I don't know, 30 times. Right now, he's currently doing a 3-year sentence he made the news because he got arrested shoplifting, which he's a habitual shoplifter.
Right.
And he stabbed one of the security officers. They went to grab him and stabbed him, so he's doing 3 years for that at medium security right now. So I see him every day, and I think I remember his Oscar-winning performance when he was crying.
Have you brought it up to his attention?
I really haven't, because what happens if I say that to him? He'll go and say, the Officer Ferruccio is picking on me, and you know what? I know the facts, and it's just upsetting, and that's what we hear. And so when they open up these hearings and the 40 to 50 inmates that come in and testify, they all stretch the truth. They all lie. And I know, and it's hurtful because they say a lot of things that are untrue.
Right.
Untrue.
Right.
I've never said we're a perfect prison. If we're doing something wrong, you know what? We've got enough, things that we do wrong to be held accountable on it. But overall, it's a safe, it's a clean, it's a secure prison, and we just want to keep it that way. And if these people that are putting this legislation in understood what the consequences were, maybe but I don't think they believe us. Like, that law that we're talking about is now the law in New York City.
Oh, really?
In New York State.
Right.
New York State right now is
So
experiencing...
you're saying they can't go into solitary confinement if they're over 50 and under 25?
Very, very strict. They called it the HALT Act in New York. And what's happening right now in New York State prisons,
Right.
the record violence, incredible how violent the prison has gone because
Right.
of this act, because there's no accountability. And that's really the secret to everything in the world. It's about holding people accountable.
Sure.
Listen, we have correctional officers that, you do something wrong, you're going to be held accountable. As a union president, I support having a strong internal affairs because I don't want abusive correctional officers.
Right.
I want correctional officers that are doing the right things for the right reasons. And it's all about accountability. We have to be able to hold the inmates accountable. The ironic part about it is I've always believed that my vice president's like, let them pass it, Richard. And you know who pays the price? The other inmates. Because what happens
Sure.
if an inmate assaults a corrections officer, we'll make sure that inmate is state charged. So instead of getting, 2 months in disciplinary confinement, he might get an additional 2 years. So in the end, that would work.
Wow.
But it's I don't want to see that happen. We have a well-run prison system, and if the people that are arguing for some of these laws would be willing to work together, we can make it.
Well, look at the whole picture.
Look at the whole picture. We can make it the best run, because I've had inmates come up to me and say, "Are these people nuts?" Because what's going to happen? Those inmates that normally get locked up, they also, what they prey on? They prey on the other inmates.
Of course.
They're not preying on corrections officers.
Right.
For the most part, they prey on other inmates, and they don't want to see that, because we have a system that's in place right now that works, and it's being torn apart. It's being torn apart across the country.
Now, you can't even control that, the inmates preying on inmates. There's almost no way to control that.
Well, we hold them accountable.
Yeah.
We hold them accountable. We do. We don't have the problems like in other states. Like Prison Rape Elimination Act, PREA. Right. It's for another inmate to rape another inmate in prison is one of the worst things that could ever happen.
Yes.
It's not something that
I had a
want to
friend
see,
of mine, a bank manager, cried to me. I was in his credit union, and he called me and talked. And I used to talk to him all the time anyway. But he knew I had some connections. A friend of mine was the head of the Senate Health, Education, Welfare, which funds the prison. Mm-hmm. So he said, "Bob, can you do anything about his nephew had got caught at B&E. He got in the prison, and he got raped in the prison, and the kid was scared to death." This is back in the late 60s, early 70s. And the kid tried to kill himself because they were raping him repeatedly, I guess. Or at least he claimed that anyway. But the uncle or grandfather, no, he's the uncle, he said he was beside himself, helpless as far as trying to deal with it.
Yeah, as I mentioned to you when we started talking, the Rhode Island Department of Corrections in the 60s, 70s, and even the early 80s was a different place.
Right.
What we have in place right now, that doesn't happen. I mean, it can happen. We're not.
Sure.
You got 2,000 people inmate-wise that have committed some pretty heinous crimes, some of them, and they are predatory by nature.
Yep.
But as long as we have the tools to do the job, I mentioned to you, there's one of the reasons it doesn't happen is we have a correctional officer in the day rooms with the inmates,
right? Yeah.
In the blocks with the inmates, so they don't have that same freedom.
Now, how do they do it? Because they don't. People don't realize this, and correct me if I'm wrong. They don't carry guns inside the.
No, correctional officers, no, not at all.
They're not allowed, but I'll bet you people think that.
Yeah. Years ago, we used to hear that all the time. They thought correctional officers were carrying guns, and that's not the case. Matter of fact, we don't even. We do carry pepper spray now.
Right.
And that's really about it.
No clubs?
No clubs. The only time we'll use some of those tools
during a riot?
is actually when we're out on a trip. If you go out to an outside hospital trip with an inmate, correctional officer will have a utility belt. One of the things on there is an aspeton. We get trained in it.
Yep.
And we also have pepper spray. The irony about the pepper spray, I could tell you a unique story on it. In contract negotiations with the state years ago, as a union, one of the things we advocated for was we wanted all the correctional officers to
take the shot,
to get a little canister of pepper spray.
Yep.
We had actually two proposals.
I did it.
Oh yeah, I have been too. We had two proposals that the state responded to us on at that time. One was we wanted gun lockers for correctional officers. We we have the same statutory powers of arrest as our police officers and our state police. We're peace officers in Rhode Island. We fought for that. Correctional officers have the right to carry a weapon. Some correctional officers carry that weapon to work. So what we were advocating is, while you're in uniform, you're at risk, because an inmate, somebody on the street
they know
sees
who you are.
They don't always know you're a correctional officer. Sometimes
Right.
they think you're a police officer.
Right.
Especially when we were in our the older uniform, we looked like police officers.
Well,
So,
the other thing is,
yeah.
if you had them in prison and now you're running into them on the street, they may not be happy with you.
Some might not be. We actually have a correctional officer that was attacked. He was walking out of his house, and two ex-inmates on a murder for hire group. They were actually a hit team. They were doing murder for hire.
Wait a minute, how long
shot
ago
the
was
officer.
this?
Oh God, before I started
You're
at the
talking
prison.
about Salisbury and
No. The group that did it was Gino Fontaine, Alan Brash,
Oh yeah,
and Skippy
Alan
Fenner.
Brash.
Yeah.
I played cards with Alan Brash.
Well,
I didn't even know he was a
Oh
murderer.
yeah. Alan, and well, actually, if you met Gino Fontaine, you'd say, "Wow, what a gentleman."
He was
But
from Cranston.
But they were
Fontaine.
they were a hit for hire.
Exactly.
I mean, matter of fact, they did credit. Like you get somebody who want killed. Well, you could take care of it. We'll do the job for you. And
They killed that guy Rudd, the contractor down in Florida.
yeah, they did. Yeah, they
with,
did. So
and
they're the
I
ones
used
that
to
shot.
babysit. I used to babysit Salisbury, who ended up turning state's evidence against them, against Alan Brash. He went with Alan Brash down to Florida and
To do
killed,
that murder.
killed it, popped the guy.
Yeah, that they were waiting for a correctional officer. He walked out of his house. Fortunately, he had a gun on. They shot him with a 12-gauge shotgun. They hit him, but he fell down.
Wow.
One of the guys, one of those individuals went up to shoot point blank, and it clicked. It dry fired.
Oh, my
So the officer
God.
took his gun, started firing back, and he's
Hallelujah,
alive.
yeah.
So we will never give up that right to carry,
Right,
because we have an
yeah.
officer that's alive today. We're law enforcement officers. We see ourselves as part of the law enforcement community. So our proposal was real simple. Give us gun lockers. When we come to work, we can lock our gun up. So the state's response to that was no. No. The attorney for the state was like, no, Richard. We don't support correctional officers carrying guns. And the other thing we wanted was pepper spray. We wanted every officer to be issued a canister of pepper spray. And the state's response to that was no. No, absolutely not, because it could be taken off the correctional officers and used against them. So what happened, irony of the whole thing was I said, well, again, you confirm my position, that our Department of Corrections doesn't know the first thing about running a prison.
Right.
Because we will never give up that right to carry a weapon. And as far as the pepper spray, there's worse things that the inmates have access to. They could access bleach and Soilex and other chemicals. If they threw it in our eyes, we'd never see again.
Right.
Pepper spray is the least of it. So what the irony of the whole thing was, a couple of years later, the Department of Corrections, we had pepper spray. It was only used at maximum security and only by the brass. Well, what happened was they looked at the use of force situations where inmates are fighting with other inmates and officers respond. At maximum, they had 50 use of force situations with 0 correctional officers hurt because of the pepper spray. We had 50 at medium security. We had like 45 correctional officers hurt.
No pepper spray.
No pepper spray. That's the difference.
So they had to get into it.
So the state said, geez, Richard, how do we, they come to me afterwards years later, how do we, we'd like to bring the pepper spray in. How do we do it? I was like frustrated. I'm like, do you remember the conversations? So those are the tools. And now we use it, and it's a very effective tool.
Right.
For you to be able to use it, you have to be sprayed with it. And I don't mean sprayed a little bit. We get
No,
doused with
I
it.
got it.
And you know what? You learn how to fight through it. You learn how to how to deal with it, and how to still be able to even do your job when you're covered. And I've been covered in it, and not even at work, because what happens when two guys are fighting or they're wrestling or someone attacks an officer, sometimes you just can't spray the inmate. You have to spray the officer too.
Sure.
But it does stop the situation. So
But if you're
just a
anywhere
tool.
near it, you're getting it in your eyes.
It's just
anyway.
a tool. Yeah, it makes it does make it tough to breathe sometimes. So but it's a good tool. For us. And that's the irony of the whole thing. Like I said, here we are, we're advocating for it, and
they're arguing, pushing
saying,
back.
Nope, and then now they want it. And we use it. We have it available, staff use it. And remember earlier I was talking about the inmates that come down to the State House and, were testifying, under oath.
Right.
I wish they were under oath, that they seen things being abused. And one of the inmates that actually is leading the group, he gave some testimony, and he said, he was a janitor in the prison, and he had access to go all around so he saw a lot of correctional officers that would take inmates off camera, and they would get tear gassed, and he'd hear screams and cries. Furthest thing from the truth. So I actually pulled that guy aside. I said, why would you say something that's a lie? You know it's a lie.
Yep.
Number one, we don't carry tear gas, we carry pepper spray. If I take this pepper spray every single day, it's weighed. So if I take the pepper spray out and it's 8 ounces, and I turn it in 6 ounces, if I don't have a report,
Why?
I'm in trouble.
Where'd the 2 ounces
Right.
go to?
Plus, if an inmate, I mentioned to you earlier about the importance of having a strong internal affairs. Well, if an inmate feels he's been abused or targeted or hurt by a corrections officer, we have 2 Rhode Island State Troopers that are on grounds constantly. Inmates can go to the phone, pick up, or another inmate can call and say, hey, this is what happened.
They don't need any...
Nope, and the state police will come in and investigate. We have a large internal affairs department that can come in, and you know what, if an inmate is alleging that he was assaulted, the internal affairs come in, they interview you. They will make sure that if it happened, you're going to be held accountable. So the moral of the story is it's again, met with more lies. These days people want to say that, but if you have the state police on grounds, we have an internal affairs,
right.
They can call their family and say, hey, Officer Ferruccio assaulted me. And you know what? You think the family's going to call the FBI or the state police or even the director. Nothing gets swept under the rug. We have an accountability piece. Right. But it just gets frustrating when you hear these lies, because there's, like I said, there's true accountability there, So.
In 1970, I think it was 71, I was at Roger Williams, my senior year at Roger Williams College at the time.
Yep.
And I had a professor for 2 courses, and he was the assistant superintendent of Providence Schools too at the time. And he was tough. And he wanted us to do a 30-page, single-space, typewritten term paper. And I had the guy for 2 classes. And by the way, I type with 2 fingers. And I'm working full-time nights, going to school full-time days. And I said, there's no way I can do this. Not 1, but 2 30-page, single-space, typewritten term papers. I said, there's no way I can do this. So I got to find an angle here. So I approached the guy. I went in his office. I said, look, any way I can do something else? Because I can't do this. There's no way I can do it. I don't have the time, and I'm too slow anyway. He goes, well, no, you're going to have to do it. I said, well, wait a minute. I got an idea. How about if I go into prison and I interview the guards and the prisoners and the warden and everybody? He goes, you'll never be able to do it. I says, well, what if I can't? He goes, yeah, right. He said, yeah, if you can do it, yeah, okay. I said, for both courses? He goes, yeah, because he said, I know you're not going to. You'll be back to telling me another story in the next couple of days. No way they'll let you do it. It was on a Friday. I left the school that afternoon. I went over to Pawtucket to see my good friend, the state senator, and I told him my situation. He said, I'll see what I can do. Monday morning, he called me. He says, they'll be waiting for you at the prison. The warden at the time was Black, a guy named Black. Do you remember that name?
I think I know who he is, yeah.
I don't think he was there very long.
Yeah.
And so I go to the prison. Sure enough, you go to as obviously you know, every day you go to the gate, and they open one gate, you get in, walk in, they close it behind you, then they open the other guy, the guard's there, he opens the other one, I get in there, and I got I bring this kid with me who was flunking in the class. I figured I'd help him along in the school. He was a senior from North Providence, Italian kid, and he was a friend of mine, but he wasn't doing well in school. And I was doing okay, but I didn't want to do these term papers. So we get inside, and I had a cassette. We didn't have cameras back then. I had a cassette player, and this lieutenant, the guards come right over, grabbed the thing right off my shoulder. In fact, he ripped the strap. He goes, "What are you doing? You can't bring a tape recorder in here." I go, "No, I got permission." He goes, "No way, no way, no way." And so I said, "We better call the warden," and he did. And he come back and handed me the cassette player, and he says, "You can do what you want here." And they came with us and went around, and I interviewed prisoners, I interviewed guards, I interviewed the work release program, I interviewed the warden. And the last day I'm there, they have fires. They had I guess a minor riot in the maximum security, and they ushered us out. And I got to see how the state police react to that, how they come in with the riot gear and everything. Yeah. We were being ushered out, with help, while they were being rushed in. And do you know, that ended up being a 5-part story in the Providence Journal, right? Because I gave the tapes to my professor for 2 classes, gave me an A in both classes. A month later, it's in the Providence Journal, 5-page, page after page, like 2 or 3 pages each night, pictures and everything, which I took. the byline was him. He got the byline. I wasn't even mentioned in the whole story.
As long as you got an A, that's all that
Yeah,
matters.
exactly. That's all I cared about. Because people were saying, how are you letting them get away with that? I said, I got A's. That's all I give a shit about. That's all I cared about. I got A's in both classes.
You know the funny part, you mentioned about the Rhode Island State Police coming in, and what happened was, one of the things that we learned with the Attica prison riot.
Yes,
because
that was right around the time, actually.
Yeah. When the Attica prison riot learned,
73.
what we learned about that riot was that we don't want the outside agencies coming in. So right there, sometime thereafterwards, we actually formed our own TAC team. So we have corrections units that actually handle that. The state police, their responsibility is on the perimeter. We don't want them coming in because, in fairness, they don't know the inmate population. Sure. They don't know the officer population. What happened in Attica, inmates switched clothes with the officers.
Exactly.
And a number of correctional officers were killed in Attica.
Right.
We don't ever want that. So we learned a lesson. I only want to bring it to your attention is because we don't let that happen anymore. I got nothing but kudos for the Rhode Island State Police, but they maintain the perimeter. We handle everything inside.
Well, that makes sense. As you say that, if a guy changes uniforms, the state troopers don't know that guy's a criminal, but the prisoners, the guards do.
Yeah, one of the advantages of being a small system, every correctional officer knows, for the most, about every correctional officer. We only have about a little over 900 corrections officers. We all know each other. So we all worked, with one another at some point, and it's a good thing. We actually, ironically, we know most of the inmate population too, but it's a.
How do you move them around from the guards from minimum to medium to maximum? Do they shift?
Well, no. One of the things in Rhode Island, and it's another one of those that's probably almost exclusive to Rhode Island, is we do everything. We're a seniority-based system.
Right.
So what happens? Correctional officers, and I keep using the term correctional. We bid by seniority.
Right.
So you usually. Not only do we bid the location, the where we want to work, we bid shift. We also bid post. So what happens? Like if me and you were working together and we get along really good, we'll bid a block together. You might be the control center, I'll be the day room, or you'll be the utility, I'll be the day room, and we work it together. And those actually, the funny part is, it's very advantageous because you know what? We take a vested interest in knowing the area, knowing the inmates, and those are some of the tools that we utilize that other places don't. And I just had a meeting with my counterpart in California, and when I mentioned to them how we pick our posts, they were like shocked that correctional officers can pick their posts, because in most places they're assigned by management.
Right.
And you know what? That's not the best way to do it, because what happens when the management's assigning, then you run the favoritism, nepotism being played out, and what happens if somebody's the captain or the deputy or the warden likes that person, he's getting a good post all the time. The danger then is now that officer,
disgruntled
officer gets ostracized by other officers.
Right.
Then inmates take advantage of it. So there's so much to it, and that's the funny part. Management might, in another state might see this little piece. They don't understand the big picture. And if you can get people to understand the big picture, prison's actually not that complicated. It really isn't. It's about treating people fairly. It's about providing the services that we legally should provide. Right. One of the worst things that frustrates me is when an inmate makes, like this summer, we had inmates at maximum security having a job action. They were upset because there's no air conditioning at maximum security. So they were mad over no air conditioning.
Well, it's an old building.
It's a 140-year-old building. Right. They were mad because on occasions the gym was closed. But what happens, the gym's closed because and we'll talk a little about it if we get time, we can talk about the shortage of staff of corrections officers. So what happens when we're short-staffed correctional officers, sometimes they close the gym.
Because they can't handle them.
So because we don't have the bodies to open it. So inmates were frustrated, but those were frustrated over the wrong things. They wanted minimum wage. They were complaining over the pay raises, and it's frustrating because like I said, I mentioned as the president of the union, I'd more than be willing to work with a legislator to bump the pay up.
Right.
But it is a little frustrating with the inmates. I would love to have a brand new maximum security. My son just finished his probation at maximum security. What the people don't understand, well, there's an inmate running around in shorts and a T-shirt when it's 98 or 100 degrees in there. There's a correctional officer in a full uniform with boots, blouse, and everything.
Wow.
So we would support an air-conditioned prison, but
sure.
you don't have a hunger strike. You don't make some of the threats that they made. That was wrong, and that's the danger. They were wrong, the inmates. If they're right on something, you know what? You'll even have our support, because I hate when they're right. That's the key. I don't like when the inmates are right and they're complaining about something, because there are times where we've had some problems. When they do construction on the pipes at the maximum security, what happens, you know how it is even in our homes. You mess with the pipes, the water comes out brown.
Yep.
You know, so if inmates are complaining that, hey, my water's coming out brown, and you know, it's okay for the state to say, well, it's not bad, you can still drink it. That's wrong. That shouldn't happen. You know, we've seen situations that because you know I can tell you some of the problems we have at the department. I mentioned to you about our programming is a mess. Well, I mentioned to you about our prison industries is a mess right now.
Right.
Well, one of the things that's probably equally or probably one of the worst
Maintenance
is
of the
maintenance.
building?
Non-existent. Yeah. Non-existent. When I started when our medium security opened in the early 90s, there were 13 maintenance guys. There's none right now. We do not have a maintenance guy.
Come on.
There is no preventative maintenance that's being done by our department. Matter of fact,
None?
None. One of the ironies of the whole thing is we do not even have a locksmith. So we're a prison. So our maintenance department.
No way.
We're a prison, which locks you would think I'm one of the more important things.
Right, yeah.
We do not have a locksmith at the prison. Our department has dropped the ball on that. The guy that was the locksmith had been telling them for a year he was retiring. As of today, as of right now, we have no locksmith. So tonight, we have an inmate that has a medical emergency.
Right.
And we can't get into his
there.
cell.
Right.
You tell me who's accountable for that. So we have some real serious problems at the Department of Corrections. And that's why we're, one of the things we're looking at now is who's going to be the new director. We have a new director. The woman that was there, Trish Coyne-Fag, she left to go to DPW for Providence, City of Providence. I wish her luck. Generally a nice woman, but what we're looking for right now is we'd like to find somebody that's a professional law enforcement person. One of the things that we used to talk about, Bob, is the devil you know rule. People say, well, the devil you know. In corrections right now, we don't want devils. I'm tired of having a devil.
I got the perfect guy for you.
Oh.
Good friend of mine.
Well, you need to pass it on to the governor. Hopefully the governor can watch it.
I'll mention it to him, too.
Yeah.
The former Bristol County House of Corrections chief.
Chief?
Yeah.
Listen.
The head sheriff.
Yeah.
Tom Hodgson.
Yeah. It's somebody, you know what? It's somebody we could talk to. I mean, ultimately, like I said, our goal is to have a professional director there. As somebody that actually knows corrections.
Right.
And that's sometimes few and far between. At least across the entire country, it's that way. The former director of the Oregon Department of Corrections, the woman that took over was put in by the governor. It used to be the press secretary for the governor.
Oh, no.
But what happened was...
Unbelievable.
Yeah, but so what happened was she was pretty sharp press secretary, but he made her the director of corrections.
Right.
But what she did when she got in there is she only... She let her operations people handle the operations, and she was more like, did the same thing. Well, because Oregon was running pretty quiet, she just got hired. She just took over the Federal Bureau of Prisons, right now. And she's in, listen, I wish her the best. But
she's out of her league.
Probably out of her league. The Federal Bureau of Prisons in the United States is probably the worst prison system in the entire country, bar none. I mean, it is horrible. I have friends of mine that work there. It is a totally mismanaged system. What the Federal Bureau of Prisons need is 5 corrections professionals to go in there as a team. They need a team approach to go in there and fix it. But what's happening in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, we're seeing some of those very similar things happening in Rhode Island right now.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we're experiencing a shortage of correctional officers, as every police department's having a shortage.
I was going to get into that. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, we have a shortage of correctional officers. This next budget, the governor put in, he wants to put 2 classes of 50 correctional officers on. Right now, we have an academy that we're ready to run. I'll be shocked if it's 24. So I don't know where they think they're going to get their 50.
Right.
And it's pretty straightforward why. In Rhode Island, we're actually still in contract negotiations, but in Rhode Island, the state of Rhode Island, we're competing in a very small pool of...
well, for police officers.
For police officers, we're all competing.
Right.
So that law enforcement pool keeps shrinking and shrinking. And what's happening with us is every police department, if you look at it, they hit their top step at 3 years. Top step means you're at the top pay scale in 3 years. Well, Rhode Island Corrections, it takes us 20 years to get there.
Wow.
So it's a huge disadvantage to the Department of Corrections when we're recruiting because, you know what, we can't recruit. So we end up getting lesser numbers, and sometimes we get people that maybe shouldn't even be working there,
Right.
So we have a real problem right now with the Department of Corrections because our the current acting director right now, you mentioned Salisbury, his name's Wayne Salisbury. He's brought a plan into the Department of Corrections right now to mirror the Federal Bureau of Prisons PT standard.
Which is not done well.
Which has been a disaster. What happens in the Federal Bureau of Prisons right now, what Wayne Salisbury brought, and I will give him his due because when he was there, he was an acting director. He was in another role. he had mentioned to us to come down and look at it in Georgia. They flew down to Georgia to take a look at the system,
Right.
and we didn't go down because we had some concerns. I already knew what it was. I have friends in the feds. I talked to them about it. So he came back and he was explaining it to us, and the only thing I wanted to know was what's the pass-fail rate? Well, what he had, and,
Right.
in fairness to him, he gave us an honest answer. Out of the 2,500 people that took the test, 7 failed. So I was
Just 7 failed?
So that's a 99.
That don't even
That's a
make sense.
99.72% pass rate.
That doesn't
So
make sense.
because what happens in the Federal Bureau of Prisons, they're so short. Corrections officers.
Right.
So it's not just a
They
correctional
lower their
officer.
standards
Well, they did. They lower their
drastically.
standards, and it's not just correctional officers that take that test. They use the counselors, the social workers, anybody that works there has to take this test. Because what happens in the prison system when they're short correctional officers,
They take them from other
a social
departments.
worker can handle.
Wow.
A social worker can handle a correctional officer's post, and we don't want to see that in Rhode Island.
Right.
So these are some of the things that we're raising. We don't support this Federal Bureau of Prisons PT test because it's ridiculous. And the irony is, I don't think you'd get the colonel of the state police. Now, in fairness, I haven't talked to Colonel Weaver, but I don't think he would support eliminating his PT test. The Cooper standard, which is what we use, is what every police department uses right now. I don't think the head of the sheriffs would do it. As a matter of fact, I don't think
You're talking about the physical test?
Yeah, the physical PT test that
I
applied.
gave it one year for the city of Pawtucket.
Did you? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's
the
important.
agility
you know?
test, and
Yep.
you got to be able to carry so much weight, pick up so much, you run so fast. You got to be able to do all kinds of different things.
Yeah, we use the Cooper standard. It's a setup. The military used to use it.
Right.
There's been some changes, and we're willing to make some changes in it to accommodate. One of the frustrations we've had is there's a 1.5 mile run.
Right.
We're never going to run as correctional officers a 1.5 miles. I mean, it's just to determine your physical, point. But what we would be willing to work with the department to take that down a little bit. But what happens, our department, because we're getting so critical of corrections officers,
Right.
short of correctional officers, they're thinking, well, if we eliminate the PT test, lowering the standard does not bring you does not
better
solve your
quality,
problem.
no.
We're already seeing it now. I was listening
Maybe
to,
lower it to a mile. instead
yeah,
of a mile and
I
a
was
half.
listening, or change the times. Instead of having to do it in 14 minutes,
Right.
you get 16 minutes, you know what to do it. I just was listening to the president of the FOP for the Providence Police, and one of the things that he had said is that they've lowered their standard, and you know what, as a result of lowering the standard, they get some people that maybe shouldn't be police officers. And that's the danger that we're facing.
Exactly.
And here in corrections, we have a serious shortage. We have an impending crisis. As of right now, we had 301 a couple of days ago. A friend of mine just retired, a lieutenant. We have 300 correctional officers that are retirement eligible.
Wow.
So if you have 900 correctional officers,
Right.
and
That's
300,
1/3.
that's a third that can actually retire. People need to pay attention to that. So we've been ringing that bell. Hopefully people are listening.
Do you know that you've done 59 minutes with Bob?
Oh my God, I could do another 59 minutes. Who
easily.
would have thought it, huh?
We didn't even get into my question.
Oh, geez.
We're going to have to do this again. But
Thank you.
give your pitch for correctional officers. What's the base pay?
Our base pay right now, we're in negotiations. I highly recommend it. Like I said, my son's a corrections officer. We start out in the low 50s. It's something we believe that the state's on board with, trying to make some changes, but we need to do it fast.
Right.
We need to make.
We need to expedite.
We need
the
to expedite
raises.
it. You know, my son, when he went through the academy, he got paid $500 a week. That's 25 cents more than minimum wage at the time. To give a correctional officer $500 a week is unacceptable.
Right.
What really frustrated us is they were given the training school, the JPWs, were getting $850 a week, while correctional officers are getting. So there's a bunch of things that need to be fixed, but I highly recommend it. My youngest son started there. I've actually told my youngest daughter, come out and work at the prison.
Right.
She doesn't know what she wants to do for a living. It's a job that I'm proud of, what we have, what we created, what it was, and what it is today. I recommend it to anybody. I really would.
So how do they get a hold of you or get a hold of the prison?
Well,
How do they apply?
we're on Police App. So all they have to do is go to the Police App website and
It's called Police App?
Police App. That's actually what it's called.
Really?
There's a way to apply, and you know what? I don't think this is going to increase the numbers. We do a pretty horrible job recruiting. I really do. It's funny. I see the state police. The funny part is Rhode Island College just gave Mass Department of Corrections a big thumbs up. Thank you for coming down to recruit. We're not there. So there's
we
a lot
got to
of
get
things
you there. I'm going to talk to the governor myself.
Sounds good.
Well, Richard, thank you for stopping by and spending a whole hour with Bob.